Charlotte Nicdao plays Poppy in Mythic Quest, Raven's Banquet. She plays an engineer for a video game. And I wanted to start off by asking you, what is your favorite video game?
So we've been getting asked this a lot, actually. And the truth is that, like, I wasn't a huge gamer when we started. Well, I didn't think that I was a huge gamer, but I definitely spent, like, half my teen years glued to The Sims, which I think counts. But at the moment, like right now, my favorite game is Animal Crossing. I feel like it's come at, like, the exact right time that the world needed it. And I've been hanging out on my and my friends' islands most of the day, fishing and picking fruit.
Yeah. Oh, nice. So what do you think, in playing Poppy, what was the most challenging sort of scene or thing you had to do this season?
You know, I feel like Poppy was a complicated character, especially at the beginning, because I think all of us, the writers and the cast as well, were trying to figure out who she was in terms of the fact that, like, you know, obviously you're meant to root for her. She is sort of the hero, but at the same time, she's really not a perfect person. Like, she can be a bit of a jerk. And so I think that a lot of the beginning of the first season was figuring out where that line was drawn. But honestly, the most challenging stuff for me was towards the end of the season, where I felt like I was coming into work every day and reading my sides and being like, I thought we were shooting a comedy. Like, all of this is very intense. And, you know, Rob McElhenney, who plays Ian, is my boss both in the show and in real life. And by episode 8, 9, pretty much every scene that I had was me yelling at him, which was, you know, kind of intimidating, even though he's the nicest guy. So that was a bit of a challenge for me.
Yeah, as you say, like, a lot of those scenes probably written, like, seems very dramatic, a lot of shouting, but they're also quite fun. They're quite funny. How does that sort of translate from taking the script to these scenes and finding the comedy in these dramatic moments?
Yeah. Honestly, I think I'm like the least threatening person ever. So I think that the writers had a lot of fun with writing me things that coming out of anyone else's mouth would have been kind of awful, but coming out of mine is just kind of like laughable. I think there's a line at 8 where I tell Rob that I'm going to open his face up, which is a horrible threat. But when I say it, it's funny. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, that was you just made a comment about your hair not being like.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That was all improvised on the day, actually. I think he said that in one take, and then Megan Gans, who's one of our co-creators, like ran up to me between takes and was like, if he says that again, you should say this.
How much improvisation is used in the show?
A fair bit, but I think that I don't know if I would necessarily call it improvisation. I mean, partly, so I did, a lot of my scenes were with Rob and David Hornsby, who plays David Brittlesby, the executive producer of the game, and he's also an executive producer of the show, and he's a writer on the show. And they've been working with each other on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia for a really long time. And so they've got a bit of a rhythm going. And at the same time, they also had spent months and months writing the show. So they really knew the characters and they really knew the world. So sometimes they would improvise and I would kind of like try to jump in and that stuff would be used. But often what we would, the way that it was fluid and how we were filming it is that we'd have writers on set that would like run in and come up with a new joke. So like I was very grateful for Megan's wit and hilarity because she, I think, is one of the reasons that Poppy is so funny is because she came up with some really, really excellent jokes for me. And sometimes I could pretend that it was me that came up with them.
Oh, nice. So you said Poppy's a bit of a jerk. There's a lot of jerks in the show in terms of characters, at least. I'm sure on set everyone's lovely. Where do you think Poppy ranks in terms of her jerkiness?
That's such a good question because I think that because you always see her beside Ian and he's so obviously a jerk, it's rare that you see the moments of her jerkiness shine through. I think it's usually when you see her with someone that is less powerful than she is, it's the moment that you realize, wait, you're no better than him. Like, the only reason that she's sympathetic is because she's around Ian a lot and he's more outwardly awful. And then I think that there are characters in the show like Brad, who's played by Danny Pudi, who, he revels in his own jerkiness. Whereas Poppy, I think, thinks that she's a really good person. It's just that she's not very good at reading the room. I think that's where a lot of her jerkiness comes from.
Yeah. Did you have a jerkiest moment for Poppy?
I mean, I loved all my scenes that I got to do with Michelle, who's played by Aparna Nancherla, who's so funny and was like someone whose work I really, really admired before we started working together. My phone just went off. I had it on and then I took it off silent because I thought I was putting it on silent when this started.
That's okay. No worries at all.
Yeah, so I love my scenes with her because it was kind of when you get to see Poppy at her least sensitive.
Yeah. What was your sort of favorite moment of the season as an experience as an actress to actually film?
That's so hard. There were two moments. One was when we got to film in the mocap studio. We had these big mocap suits and caps on, and we were in a real mocap studio and they were actually capturing our movements. And so there was a lot of like physical comedy in that scene, which I really like. And I think that it was just a fun day. I overheated a lot in it though. I overheat really easily, and I was in this like skin tight, like wetsuit fabric all day dancing, which was my choice. Like, no one told me I had to, but I was like, what would be funny if I was dancing this whole scene? And by the end of the day, I was like, why did I decide to do this? But it was still really fun. And then the other moment that I think just will probably stick in my mind forever is in the final episode where Poppy kind of gets everything that she ever dreamed of. And I get to hold this symbolic prop above my head, which is this shovel that we sort of toy with through the whole season as a symbol of creation and power. And I have this moment right at the very end where I get to hold the shovel above my head, and it's sort of this victorious moment. And I think, this show was an absolute dream for me in every way. And I was absolutely blown away by getting to be a part of it. And I think it's very difficult to separate your feelings as a character and your feelings as an actor when they align so perfectly like that, where you get to like stand and have your moment and have this sort of victorious feeling and be like, oh man, I'm here, I'm doing it. So that was memorable for me.
So it's a dream getting to be on this show. How did that come about? How did you get the role of Poppy?
I've been coming out to LA for a few years. I've been really fortunate with getting to sort of make a living out of being an actor in Australia. And I think, trying to break into Hollywood is kind of the thing that everyone tries to do, I guess. But at the same time, I love American comedy. It's the thing that I spend most of my time watching. And so I think I've been coming out here for a few years really hoping to basically get on a show exactly like Mythic Quest. And I kept getting close to stuff. I never quite got there. And I was out here in 2018, I think, like late in 2018. And I kind of decided that this was my last trip. I was just like, it just doesn't happen for everyone. And, I've got a good thing going in Australia and this is my trip. I'm going to say goodbye. And the last week that I was out here was my first audition for Mythic Quest. And I got a call the next day from the casting director, like, don't get on a plane. And I ended up staying, I think that was, I can't remember, like September or something. And I kept pushing my flight week to week to week until eventually it was December and we were filming the pilot episode.
Well,
Yeah.
there you go. You said American comedy is something you've watched a lot, something that you sort of have loved a lot. What do you have a favorite from growing up or something?
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, my sister and I used to save up our money to buy the Friends DVD box sets. Yeah. And I think I've seen every episode of Friends like 5 to 10 times. Like, I think I saw an episode last year that I hadn't seen before, and I was shocked. I felt like I'd found the Holy Grail. I was like, oh my God, what is this? And then, you know, I've loved like comedies like 30 Rock and Parks and Rec and, you know, The Office and Community I always loved. And those are shows that, I don't know, I love television as a comfort activity. And I've been doing a lot of that lately too. We fell asleep watching TV last night, which is weird now that like I'm pretty good to Danny and Megan. And I'm like, oh, there's Danny and Megan wrote this episode. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. This role, I imagine a Poppy, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, was not meant to be an Australian character.
No. And in fact, I went in, my first audition for the show was for Poppy, and the feedback that I got after that first audition was that they really liked what I had done with the character, but that I was like 10 to 15 years too young for what they were originally picturing. The story was a little bit more that Poppy and Ian were equals, like they had equal amounts of power, I suppose. And so they ended up bringing me in for another character, and trying to find a spot for me that fitted with what I was bringing to the table. And in the end, I think, it was a long casting process, which I'm sort of grateful for, because it really, I'm sure there was a lot of great things on their end from being able to really figure out what would be the right move. But for me, it helped me discover a lot of different versions of the character. And I did, a couple of times I read for her in an American accent. And when it came down to it, I think they were like, you know, the thing that we like about what you're bringing to the table is kind of who you are. And so they let me keep my Australian accent, which was great for me. And we're leaning into it, I think, even more in season 2. They've written a lot of Australianisms in, which I really like.
Oh, that's nice. Like the old Sex Pest or whatever.
Yeah, like the old Sex Pest, or like I think Megan's been watching some Australian reality shows like Australian Love Island, which I don't know if Poppy is like that much of a bogan, but they've also been watching Kath and Kim. So I think that I'm like, I don't know if she's like that Australian, but it is I kind of like the idea that like, the more emotional or the more the happier or the more comfortable she gets, the more Australian she becomes. Like she sinks back into whatever that original like pure Australian she was.
Yeah, no, and even though she might not be like that sort of bogan, she's probably aware of. She's a very aware person, right? She'd be aware of all the lingo.
Totally, and I think it's like, I do, at the risk of making it sound like I didn't do any acting in the show, like I think she's about the same amount of Australian as I am, which is like, you know, I was born in the western suburbs of Melbourne, and I sort of grew up in Strathmore, and like, you know, my mom her background is like generations and generations of Australians, and my dad moved to Australia from the Philippines when he was a teenager and lent into being as Australian as possible as he could in that time, which I think is pretty typical for immigrants in that time, or any time really. So I'm pretty Aussie. And I actually like the fact that, I feel like you don't see as many exports from Australia that aren't, blonde haired and blue eyed. And as talented as all those people are, it's not necessarily an accurate cross-section of what our country looks like. So it's really cool to be able to represent what a lot of my mates at home look like as an Australian.
Yeah, no, it is cool. When you come to work, this is you've said it was a dream getting this job and being able to work on this show. What's the thing when you sort of drive in or come into work on Mythic Quest in the mornings that you think is most special?
I mean, honestly, I have fallen so in love with all the cast and crew on the show. And, you know, we filmed one episode of season 2 before we were shut down, for obvious reasons. Getting to go in that week and see all the people that, you know, we formed these incredible bonds with last year again was really, really special. I think it's incredibly rare to get to do your dream job, especially when it's on a TV show. Like, who gets to do that? And then on top of that, to love the material and to just genuinely love all the people that you work with. And I know a lot of people say that, but like, I have a text thread going with the other actresses on the show at the moment, and like, we're in that chat every day, checking in on each other and making each other laugh. And I think that's really special.
Yeah. Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
Finally, Charlotte, what do you think is the most, what's your favorite thing about Mythic Quest? Not necessarily as an actress, or is it, but just as someone who watches the show, what do you think the special thing is about that show?
I mean, there's a couple of things. Really, it's the kind of show that I would love. It's the kind of show that I would binge. It falls into that same category as all the shows that I mentioned that I loved, you know, growing up, and that kind of formed my comedic sensibilities. And so that's, I think, really cool. But I also think, I mean, the thing is, like, the video game world is massive. It's huge. I think that we talk about it in the first episode about how it really, in the entertainment industry, it eclipses film and TV, and yet it's still thought of as being niche. And I think it's really interesting that, you know, there have been shows about the tech industry and maybe, you know, a couple of shows that touch on the gaming industry, but this show really delves deep into what video game development is like. And we worked really closely with Ubisoft. We had consultants on set all the time. A lot of the storylines that you see in season 1 are either based on something real or were a plot that the writers came up with that then, since the show has been made, has happened in real life. Like, we do an episode about them opening a casino in the game, and then I think Grand Theft Auto did that after we filmed the show. So I think it's really, I mean, it's fun to watch, but it's a really interesting into this huge, extremely lucrative, high-powered world that hasn't been explored very much yet.
Yeah. That's great. Charlotte, thank you so much for talking with us about Mythic Quest today. All the best of luck for the Emmy Awards that are coming up later in the year and other entertainment awards down the pipeline. For anyone watching this interview, you can tune in to goldderby.com to see other interviews with celebrities and awards contenders, and make your predictions in the awards and compete against the best editors and experts and users from around the world, and chime in our forums. Charlotte, thanks so much.
Thank you.